The Iranian-led axis of evil has suffered lethal setbacks over the past year, including the elimination of the Hamas brigades in Gaza, the destruction and retreat of Hezbollah in Lebanon, and the fall of the al-Assad regime in Syria. Iran itself has suffered huge losses in Israeli airstrikes. Yet the Houthis continue to attack and remain the last proxy standing in the Iranian arsenal. However, that could soon change. More from ILTV's Devo Klein.
Over 1 million Israelis were forced to shelter in central Israel yesterday due to a drone detection from the Houthi rebels in Yemen. After the destruction of Hamas capabilities and Hezbollah in a ceasefire agreement, and Iran in a holding pattern, only the Houthis remain committed to launching attacks on Israel as long as the war in Gaza continues.
إن القوات المسلحة اليمنية مستمرة في مواصلة تنفيذ عملياتها العسكرية وضرب كافة الأهداف التابعة للعدو الإسرائيلي في الأراضي المحتلة، وإن هذه العمليات لن تتوقف إلا بوقف العدوان على غزة ورفع الحصار عنها.
Israel has previously responded to the Houthis with 2 rounds of airstrikes in July and September, but Houthis have not suffered a major setback in months. The drone fired towards central Israel yesterday was shot down without causing damages. But just last week, a Houthi UAV hit the top floor of an apartment building in Yavne. Fortunately, no one was injured. Perhaps the time to deal with the Houthis has finally come. American forces carried out an airstrike against a Houthi command and control facility that was used by the Yemeni rebels to coordinate attacks as the Houthis continue striking ships in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. The targeted facility was a hub for coordinating Houthi operations, such as attacks against U.S. Navy warships and merchant vessels. With the Israeli Air Force now free from major operations on other fronts, speculation is mounting that another major and perhaps coordinated operation against the Houthis could be in the offing.
And the Iranian-led axis has been dramatically set back in Gaza, in Lebanon, and in Syria. But the Houthis in Yemen are still standing. Are they next in line? Joining us now to discuss is British military expert Andrew Fox. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
So the Iranian Houthi proxy is still striking strategic global shipping and just yesterday targeted Israel with a ballistic missile. In your estimation, is a major Israeli and perhaps allied strike on the Houthis forthcoming?
I think it's possible. I think the last 14 months with Yemen, I think we've been very reactive, and we haven't had a particularly clear strategy as to how to find a political or military solution to the problem of Houthi interference, not only in the Gulf, but also with their direct attacks on Israel. I think a completely independent Israeli strike is extremely unlikely. They will need American facilitation of things like refueling and recovery of potential downed aircraft should such an eventuality occur. But I think it's very clear that with the collapse of the remainder of Iran's Shiite crescent proxy strategy, the time does feel right to start taking slightly more assertive action towards the Houthis.
More assertive action towards the Houthis, and perhaps not only. Iranian air defense was badly damaged by Israel. They were just ousted from Syria after losing in Lebanon. Is Iran ready to admit defeat, let the Houthis stand alone, or perhaps is Israel and its allies considering an attack against Iran itself, the head of the snake?
I haven't seen any indications of that yet, but I do have real concerns about Iran between now and Mr. Trump's inauguration on 20th of January. We've seen a complete collapse of their proxy strategy. We've seen them humiliated domestically as the Israelis took out their air defenses with absolutely no effort at all. And really, that doesn't leave Iran with very many options, especially with a very hostile Trump administration coming in Washington. My biggest fear is that they might try and make a rush for some sort of nuclear power status between now and that inauguration date.
So both Netanyahu and Trump have said that they would not allow Iran to attain nuclear weapons. Do you think that indicates that perhaps now is the right time to strike? And what would it take to actually topple this regime once and for all?
Well, these are really complicated problems, and we've seen the B-52s placed forward in the Gulf. They're based out of Doha, and we know that the Americans have been willing to use them against ISIS in Syria. So the option is on the table, and it's. I think not all parties, actually, even Mr. Biden as well as Mr. Trump, I think they're all prepared to use force against Iran should they make that rush for the bomb. But it's easier said than done because these nuclear facilities are exceptionally well hidden, and you would have to strike all of them comprehensively to take out Iran's ability to make a nuke, because their system and their process is so well developed and is so far down the line. You'd have to be absolutely certain you got everything. And then, of course, when it comes to changing regime in Tehran, we've seen what happens in the Gulf when people decapitate these strongman regimes. We saw it in Iraq with Saddam Hussein. We saw it in Libya with Muammar Gaddafi. And the danger is what comes next and how you guarantee that what replaces the regime that you've taken out is any better than the one that you've just removed.
Mm-hmm. You don't sound very optimistic about the possibilities of taking out Iran's nuclear site or even toppling the regime.
No, I think they're both possibilities. I think certainly the nuclear sites, we have the firepower in the Gulf to do that. It's just a very, very extended operation. And of course, we have international law considerations to take into play as well. We can't, we will have to sort of face a lot of international condemnation if we in the West, I think, do launch those attacks on Iran and their nuclear capability. When it comes to the regime change, I am slightly more skeptical. You know, Iran has 500,000 soldiers in the field, and whilst they're not a particularly effective expeditionary army, there's certainly more than enough Iranian troops to sort of control any revolution that might come from the back of strikes on Iran's leadership. It's a very, very complicated country. We've tried to regime change in Iran before, and it's gone spectacularly wrong and led us to the situation we're in today. So whilst I'm hesitant to recommend it as a course of action, if we do undertake it, then it's something that needs serious thought as to what comes next. That's the killer question when it comes to taking out the regime in Tehran.
All right, well, Andrew Fox, thank you so much for your insights and analysis today.
Thank you.
And meanwhile, a Russian report indicates that in an unprecedented incident, IDF troops entered a military facility on the ground in the Syrian capital of Damascus for 20 minutes and then departed. And on the Golan, the rebels in Syria have been turning over weapons from the al-Assad regime to the IDF. The items turned over reportedly include chemical weapons that had been used by the Syrian regime in the civil war against the rebels themselves. More from ILTV's Steve Leibovitz.
In the buffer between Israel and Syria, residents of the Syrian Golan and rebel fighters have reportedly been handing over weapons from the Assad regime to the IDF. According to Israel's Channel 12, the weapons include chemical warfare materials. The rebels loaded trucks with hundreds of boxes of ammunition, mortars, bombs, and grenades and transferred them to the IDF. Former Syrian ruler Bashar al-Assad had used chemical warfare to fight against the rebel forces for years, and now that the rebels have taken control of these weapon stockpiles, they decided to give them to Israel to dispose. The IDF has not set a timetable for its deployment on the Syrian side of the Golan. Defense Minister Katz has instructed the army to prepare to remain through the winter and until the stabilization of the new regime in Syria. Meanwhile, in Lebanon, the IDF continues efforts to remove any remaining Hezbollah materials in areas controlled by the IDF while enforcing any ceasefire violations by Hezbollah. Troops located weapons warehouses with heavy rocket launchers, anti-tank missiles, and mortars. The materials were destroyed or confiscated. The IDF has been gradually leaving villages in South Lebanon, being replaced under CENTCOM supervision by the Lebanese army. The full withdrawal back to the Israeli-Lebanese border is due to be completed by the end of next month.
And in tragic news, in Gaza, 2 IDF soldiers were killed today after a building collapsed with them inside. May their memories be for a blessing. And U.S. President-elect Donald Trump reiterated his threat to Hamas, saying that all hell is going to break out if the hostages are not returned by the time he takes office. Trump also said he had a very good talk with Prime Minister Netanyahu. The details in the following report. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump on Monday reiterated his threat to Hamas that all hell is going to break out if it does not release the hostages by January 20th, the day he is set to take office. He made the threat during a press conference in Florida and following a phone call with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, which Trump characterized as a recap call.
On Bibi, we had a very good talk. We discussed what is going to happen, and I'll be very available on January 20th, and we'll see. As you know, I gave warning that if these hostages aren't back home by that date, all hell's going to break out, and very strong.
When a reporter asked what the president-elect means by hell to pay, Trump said the following.
Well, they're going to have to determine what that means, but it means it won't be pleasant.
Mr. President,
It's not going to be pleasant, yeah.
Hamas is currently holding 100 hostages for 438 days, and negotiations for their release under the Biden administration are ongoing after months of stalled talks. Meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden on Monday, speaking at his last White House Hanukkah reception as president, pledged he would not stop in his efforts to ensure all the hostages return home.
I've gotten over 100 hostages out. I will not stop till I get every single one of them home. And so I learned a long time ago, you don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist. I'm a Zionist.
Biden, along with Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff, reaffirmed his solidarity with the Jewish American community and underscored his commitment to combating anti-Semitism.
My final Hanukkah message to you is this. As president, this is to hold on to that hope. Shine your light. Shine the light of optimism. And above all, keep the faith. Keep the faith. May God bless you. Happy Hanukkah.
And now reports indicate that we are currently closer to reaching a hostage deal than we have been in months. Reports also indicate that Hamas has dropped its main demand of a complete end to the war. ILTV's Ariella Lahiani is at Tel Aviv Hostage Square. Ariella, what can you tell us about the current status of hostage talks?
Yes, thank you, Ladar. So Defense Minister Israel Katz has stated that hostage negotiations are closer than ever to reaching a deal, and he's highlighted that Hamas is showing flexibility on key points such as the Philadelphia and Netzarim corridors, both of which he believes will no longer be an obstacle in reaching an agreement. He's also added that a deal would be phased and most likely receive cabinet approval, though he's also urged caution to avoid any public discussion that could jeopardize progress. Now, meanwhile, an Israeli delegation of officials from the IDF, Shin Bet and Mossad have traveled to Qatar for further discussions. And whilst officials claim that this trip by no means guarantees any sort of breakthrough, it does definitely signal Israel's commitment to securing the release of the hostages. Now, meanwhile, on the other side, a senior Hamas official has indicated that a ceasefire and prisoner exchange is within reach given Israel meets demands such as withdrawing IDF troops. Now, international mediators are pushing for confidentiality to ensure talks aren't derailed. So whilst most discussions are being kept pretty much under wraps, it is clear that for the first time in months we are seeing some substantial progress being made.
And so given these developments, I mean, how likely is a breakthrough, and what impact, might this have on the conflict?
Yeah, so as I stated, a breakthrough now seems more possible than in months, with both sides showing more flexibility. Now, whilst any deal will most likely be phased, meaning there will not be an immediate end to hostilities, if successful, this could, of course, lead to broader de-escalations. However, Israel is remaining focused on preventing Hamas from rearming. Now, another point of contention is the number of hostages that would be released. Hamas had submitted a list of 30 hostages they were prepared to release. However, there is much controversy and pressure on the idea that a deal should secure the release of all hostages.
Thank you, Ariella, for the report. Indeed, Hamas dropping its main demand, hopefully a good sign, and hopefully the hostages will return home as soon as possible. And in other news, in Hebron, an ancient Jewish city under constant threat, safety is a daily battle. The Hebron Fund provides critical resources to protect residents and preserve this legacy. And if you also want to support, you can scan the QR code on the screen now.
In Hebron, the battle for safety and security is constant. This ancient city, one of Judaism's holiest sites, is home to a Jewish community surrounded by threats. The city's proximity to Hamas strongholds means vigilance isn't optional, it's a way of life. Hebron's defenders, its residents, IDF soldiers, and civilian first responders face daily dangers to keep this community safe. They need support and critical resources. The Hebron Fund, a nonprofit founded in 1979, is dedicated to sustaining Jewish life in Hebron, defending not just a city, but a legacy. For centuries, Hebron was inaccessible to Jewish worshippers. That changed after 1967, and now the Hebron Fund works tirelessly to ensure this community thrives. But today, threats are escalating. The need is urgent. Your support can provide surveillance cameras and thermal drones to detect threats before they escalate, medical ATVs and defibrillators for life-saving response, tactical equipment and radios for better coordination, and thermal clothing to endure long, cold shifts. Beyond defense, this is about community resilience. The Hebron Fund helps boost morale by supporting soldiers with warm meals and gratitude events. They also provide food vouchers for families affected by terror. Supporting Hebron means helping protect Israel's heartland. It ensures the preservation of the tomb of the forefathers and mothers and the surrounding sacred sites. Your contribution helps maintain Jewish life in this historic city and safeguards a legacy that has endured for generations.
And joining us now with more is Ishai Fleischer, Director of International Affairs at the Jewish community of Hebron. Ishai, thank you for joining us.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
So can you shed some light on what kinds of challenges Hebron's residents, soldiers, and first responders face, especially given the high number of Hamas supporters in that area?
Well, we face a slew of challenges. One of them, as you noted, is that we're surrounded by an Arab city of Hebron, which has 200,000 Arabs living there, run by the Palestinian Authority, and there's a lot of Hamas supporters. Some people call it even a Hamas city. So that's definitely one problem. So we have a lot of security needs. We have, a whole army that defends not just the Jewish community of Hebron, but all the visitors that Jews and people around the world who want to come and connect with the tomb of Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob and Leah. So we've got these security needs, and we also have these touristic needs. A lot of people want to come and make pilgrimage. So that's a very important aspect of our life, is that on the one hand, we're a security town. On the other hand, we're a touristic town. So in many ways, we mirror what Israel is, which is a country that has a security element, but wants to bring in people and connect with a lot of people. So those are some of the challenges. We're about an hour south of Jerusalem, an hour north of Beersheba, so we're a little bit by ourselves. And at the same time, we face other challenges, which is what I call the narrative war. We face a lot of besmirchment of the history of the Jewish community of Hebron, erasure, an effort to erase our history, an effort to blacken our name. But we fight through that with the amazing message of the history of the Jewish community of Hebron and the connection to the forefathers and mothers and the heritage of the Jewish people in this place.
And so why are these sort of morale boosters for soldiers, food vouchers for families affected by terror, why are they so essential to Hebron's resilience?
Well, we got to keep those soldiers happy, and we got to make sure that they understand what they're doing there. And we think that a happy soldier is a better defensive soldier. And we also want to use the opportunity of that soldier coming to our town to have him or her remember the awesome time that they had there. Winter is coming. They need to stay warm, so they need little things, like from a hot pizza to some gloves and whatever they need. We want to make sure that they have an excellent time. We actually have the great privilege of being a community, a touristic spot, and also an army place. So you actually get to meet the army, you get to connect with the army. Individual people could just walk up to soldiers, say hi to them. A lot of places, like you're not gonna see the soldier in your day-to-day life if you're living, let's say, in Tel Aviv. But in Hebron, you get to see soldiers every day. That's actually a great privilege. So we want to make sure that people understand that privilege, people connect to that privilege, and make sure that our soldiers are happy, healthy, connected, and really have a great service, that they remember, have good memories, but they also do their job to protect the visitors and the residents of Hebron.
Mm-hmm. And with threats rising, how can donations help Hebron's defenders and the community stay safe and strong?
Cameras make a difference. That's a small defensive act that we could take. More cameras, more security on that level. As we said before, more warmth for the soldiers in this coming winter season. More families that have been affected by terrorism. Helping them cope and helping them have a better matriculation back into society from the challenges that they face, the pain that they face, and at the same time, more education, more buses for visitors. We subsidize buses a lot of times for people to come in schools. More lunches, more tours, more visitations to the museum. All these little things make Hebron more alive. And that's our great challenge right now, is to make sure that we come back to these places that we've lived in actually for over 3,000 years, to make sure they're big and they're strong and that people are connected to the heritage. We're also teachers. We've got to teach the heritage of Abraham and Sarah, Isaac, Rebecca, Jacob, and Leah. We got to push out that great story and, of course, push back against the jihad narrative that wants to erase our history in this place. We won't let that happen. With people's support, we can do all of those things. We're really a very tight organization that gets it done. We use the money for great things, and your support basically is a blessing to the community, a blessing to the Tomb of the Patriarchs and Matriarchs, and a blessing to the visitors and the soldiers. And with a donation, you're really doing a lot to strengthen Hebron, but to strengthen all of Israel and the biblical heritage.
All right. Well, Yishai Fleischer, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And our final story, the Antisemite of the Year for 2024 has been revealed, and it's no other than disgraced conservative pundit Candace Owens. The so-called award is bestowed by Stop Antisemitism, a leading nonpartisan U.S.-based organization that combats anti-Semitism. On announcing the honor, Stop Antisemitism wrote that from defending Hitler's actions in Germany and mocking Jewish fears over Kanye West's anti-Semitic tweets, to claiming Israel forces Muslims into segregated quarters and insinuating Hollywood is run by sinister Jewish gangs, Owens has been rightfully crowned 2024's Anti-Semite of the Year. Following October 7th, Owens' anti-Semitism kicked into high gear as she spread conspiracy theories about Jews and Israel. This led to her removal from the Daily Wire and suspension from YouTube. She's since been denounced by evangelical leaders and even her own father-in-law. Owens was in good company alongside environmental activist turned Hamas supporter Greta Thunberg and Twitch streamer and Hamas frontman Hassan Piker, rounding out the top three. Definitely worthy of the so-called honor. And now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Partly cloudy skies are expected tonight around the country, with temperatures reaching lows of around 8 degrees Celsius or 46 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow, mostly clear skies and cool weather expected as temperatures should climb to reach highs of 20 degrees Celsius or 69 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channel, subscribe to our newsletter, and explore our website, iltv.tv. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Ladarga Velazi. Be well, stay safe, and thank you so much for watching.